we're scoping it out.
After he finished his stint as a Union Orthodox recruiter through the fall election campaign, primarily at my campus, Merritt College, the proud home of the Black Panther Party, and where I teach history. In the aftermath of the Oakland teachers' strike and the national teachers' strike rate, my union started preparation for a possible community college strike next school year. Anyone who wants to hear more about that, check with me after the rally. Now, that there aren't a lot of more labor seekers today in this project, me and Steve, I think, are the only representatives of the labor movement here. Any serious effort that protests against the misdeeds of the U.S. government, any defense of immigrants against deportation, any defense of black people against police violence, indeed any mobilization of working people against the steadily increasing impoverished they are being subjected to in America, is unlikely to get far without the backing of the only organization working people have to defend themselves against the crimes of our corrupt, vicious, imperialist, white racist, male chauvinist, and generally just vicious ruling class here in America.
Right.
Now, okay, so Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, as you've already heard, was trapped for 7 years at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he sought asylum in 2012. After those bogus Swedish rape accusations came out. And as we all know, London police dragged him out with the permission of Ecuador's latest president, a lackey of Donald Trump, who arrested him and now sentenced him to 50 weeks in jail in one of England's ugliest prisons for violating his bail on a case which Sweden dropped several years ago. And now, just as WikiLeaks warned all along, they are trying to extradite him to the USA, where God alone knows what American secret police will do to him to extract from him everything. Now it's the administration masterminding the campaign against Assange with the full support of the Democrats, whether mainstream or progressive or even so-called socialists. At one point, some Trump people were actually talking about the death penalty. That is when they weren't praising Hillary Clinton's dirty linen. Talk about sleazebags. Then there's Trump himself, while praising WikiLeaks in public when it's convenient, is trying right now to get him deported to America to be tried. And for what? Not for alleged sexual misconduct, certainly not for working with Putin, for helping Chelsea Manning reveal the truth about U.S. war crimes in Iraq. And now, of course, she's back in jail for refusing to testify against him. Obama and Hillary, however much they hated Assange, shrunk back from going after him directly for what WikiLeaks has revealed to the world, being as Obama was supposedly against the Iraq War, though Hillary never was. So they preferred to cook up that phony rape framework that the Swedish government finally dropped when they no longer needed it, but with all the hullabaloo about how supposedly Assange was an agent of Putin. Now, I may get back to that later if we've got the time. By the way, now they're actually thinking about reviving it, just in case Assange beats the attempt to extradite him to the USA. That way he can get extradited to Sweden, the ridiculous rape charge can be dropped again like the hot potato it is, and he can get packed off to the US prison from Sweden instead of England. Okay. Moving right along. This is a rally in defense not just of Julian Assange, but of press freedom. Well, until last summer, Steve and I were the Human Rights Committee of the Media Workers Union, the Union of Press Workers. We got kicked out of the committee as we kept bringing up human rights cases that our union leadership thought were too controversial. We never even tried to get the union to defend Julian Assange because we knew exactly the response we'd have gotten. The American labor movement is feeble, battered, scared, stiff, and generations deep in the arms of the Democratic Party, which hates Julian Assange like poison. So now liberals and conservatives are baying for Assange's blood side by side. The liberals want him arrested for allegedly helping Donald Trump getting elected by letting the cat out of the bag about Hillary's dirty dealings. Even before the outbreak of liberal conspiracy mongering over alleged Russian interference in our wonderful American elections, which poor people, especially blacks and Latinos, get excluded from by every trick in the book, liberals considered Assange dangerous because, unlike legitimate mainstream mouthpieces like the New York Times, he refuses to redact the material WikiLeaks publishes when the US government tells him to. The Times and other liberal mouthpieces like The Guardian in England published and made money off of the news revealed by WikiLeaks, only to turn on him and lead the witch hunt against him. They were so happy when it turned out they weren't getting charged too that they redoubled their smear campaign against him. Pretty short-sighted on their part, as if he is convicted for news gathering as a criminal conspiracy, they could easily be next. Now, Democrats came to despise Assange even more after WikiLeaks released a trove of emails in 2016, hacked by the Russians, so the story goes, from the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, which supposedly helped Trump win the presidency. Since the election, the Democrats have pulled out all the stops in an effort to persuade the world that we was robbed by an attack of hackers operating under the command of Putin with the intent of undermining American democracy by electing his puppet Donald Trump, the Manchurian candidate, who must be a secret Russian plant himself since his knowledge of the English language is so poor, right? And their proof was a gilt-edged report prepared by the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, that supposedly tracked the chain of command of the Kremlin, except that none of the evidence for this wild conspiracy theory ever got released to the public because it's all top secret, you see. Okay, skipping over that. This is all justified by that bizarre claim I'm talking about that Julian Assange and Donald Trump are agents of the Kremlin. And then they have the gall to accuse Trump of circulating conspiracy theories, an extreme case of calling the kettle calling the pot black. What's going on is the mainstream Democrats, not so different from the Republicans, are trying to divert the hatred so many people feel against Trump for his real crimes, because the only thing Trump has done off he doesn't belong in prison for, namely he's not quite as eager to go against war against Russia as the Democrats. So, I would say, by unmasking the people who run this country's everyday lies, intrigues, and wanton slaughter, brave whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange have done a great service to the entire world. These truth tellers have lifted the lid just a little bit off of the dirty secrets of U.S. and world imperialism. But to get rid of the imperialist war crimes exposed once and for all, we need worldwide socialist revolution. Meanwhile, let's unite to all say, hands off Julian Assange.
Hands off Julian Assange.
Hands off Chelsea Manning.
Hands off Chelsea Manning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So, one of we have a speaker here who actually is a war veteran, and he has, like other war veterans, came to the conclusion that they weren't engaged in defending the United States, they were engaged in war crimes against the people of the world. So welcome Daniel Borgstrom with Veterans for Peace.
Hello. One thing, I was 4 years in the Marine Corps. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I was 4 years in the Marine Corps. I was not actually in Vietnam or in the war. I was during the Bay of Pigs. It looked like we would be sent. My unit would be sent to Cuba, and we were not. Anyway, let me read this. Hello, my name is Daniel Borgstrom, member of Veterans for Peace, also a member of KPFA's local station board.
This is working?
A bit about Veterans for Peace. We're an anti-war veterans organization with numerous chapters around the country. And we've issued a statement in support of journalist and publisher Assange and whistleblower Manning. This week, we arranged for a meeting with Congressman Barbara Lee to ask her to speak out in support of Manning and Assange. Julian Assange has won numerous awards for his journalism. So let me talk a bit about journalism, the media, and about KPFA. I think we know pretty much what the corporate media does, that echoes and promotes the narratives of the political establishment. That's been the way it is. It's been that way for over a century. One of my favorite narratives is, remember the Maine. That was back in 1898. The official story was that Spain blew up the USS Maine, and that was promoted by the Hearst and other newspapers. no evidence. No, still no evidence. But who needs evidence when you need a war? That's the way the corporate media has always been, and that's the way they remain to this day. I think everyone here could give numerous examples of media cover-ups and disinformation. At the same time, occasionally some very insightful reporting is done. Some corporate journalists are allowed a pretty long leash. And some forget that there is that leash. There was Gary Webb, a reporter for the San Jose Mercury News, who investigated and reported on the CIA's involvement in drug trafficking to support the counterinsurgency against the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. And at first, the newspaper printed his articles, and for a while the editors even stood by him, but not for long. We remember what happened to Gary Webb. Yes, there is a leash. Sometimes it's a short leash. Sometimes it's a long leash. Sometimes a very long leash. But that leash is there, always. The advent of the internet has enabled some journalists to leave the world of corporate media and operate on their own. One of these was journalist Robert Perry, who founded Consortium News, which is one of my favorite websites. A couple of years ago, Perry passed away, and the site is now run by Joe Lauria. The site is one of the numerous good alternative news sources available today. Yeah, there are many of them. Nevertheless, the First Amendment rights of all journalists are under constant attack. Shortly after Hillary Clinton lost this 2016 election to Donald Trump, the corporate media blamed the websites. On Thanksgiving Day 2016, the Washington Post proclaimed in the front page article, "Russian propaganda helped spread fake news during election, experts say." Note that they're quoting experts. The Post experts were an anonymous group known as Propernaut, which presented a list of 200 websites that supposedly spread fake news. The New York Times and other corporate media echoed this false news campaign. The following month, on December 2016, one of then President Obama's last acts while in office was to sign a provision establishing an Orwellian Ministry of Truth. It was euphemistically called an anti-propaganda agency. Officially, it's known as the Global Engagement Center. Weird name. However, this campaign against independent journalists did not begin in 2016. It's much older. When WikiLeaks editor Julian Assange published the Collateral Murder video and other items, whistleblower Manning, whistleblower Manning, U.S. government began actions to have Assange brought to the U.S. to stand trial. Those actions have been going on for a decade now. So it's not only the owners of it's not only the owners of the corporate media who exercise a leash over their employees. Our government is also in the leash business, quite openly now. And those leashes are getting shorter and shorter. As might be expected, the corporate media is leading the attack on Assange and on Manning. What's really disappointing, scary, and disgusting is that many supposedly progressive journalists have been echoing those attacks, refusing to defend the First Amendment press freedoms of Julian Assange they seem to ignore the fairly obvious fact that the attack on Assange is only the tip of the iceberg. This is this is a symptom of the direction taken by many supposedly, I don't know, maybe I should wait till this goes by. Okay, yeah. Okay, continuing. No. This is a symptom of the direction taken by many supposedly progressive and independent media outlets, attacking Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, often echoing the neoliberal neocon establishment calls for humanitarian intervention. Many have become pro-war progressives, a tragic oxymoron. KPFA at 94.1 FM is not immune to this trend. This station has been on the air for 70 years, fiercely independent and anti-war. However, it's been drifting to the right, and several progressive programs have been taken off the air during this last year. I mentioned that I'm on the local station board at KPFA. I was elected just a couple of months ago. And the reason I ran for this board was to help preserve KPFA's traditional anti-war voice. This year, there's going to be another election for KPFA's board. And I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all of you to become voting members of KPFA. And also to please consider running for the board. We need people to defend KPFA's traditional anti-war voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And one of those journalists at KPFA who actually has produced a tremendous amount of information on Julian Assange is Ann Garrison. And she writes for the Black Agenda and has been quite active in getting the word out and supporting Julian Assange. So welcome, Ann Garrison.
Thank you. Can you hear? I don't really like shouting, but shout. Okay. Okay. Nozomi recommended 1,500 words, and I said, that's a lot of words, so I better write them down. But if I run out of breath here, this will be published in Consortium News, the Black Agenda Report, the San Francisco Bayview, or maybe all of them. Okay? Now, you may have heard a lot of jabbering about whether or not Julian Assange is really a journalist. That's verbal slapstick because, for one, anyone who compiles and transmits information to a willing audience is a journalist. Some are good, most are awful, even evil, but Julian Assange is historic. Saying he's not a journalist is like saying Darwin wasn't a biologist, Einstein wasn't a physicist, LeBron James can't play basketball, and by the way, Galileo was wrong. The Earth's flat after all, and we're the center of the universe. Okay, Assange is a genius who could have joined the club of tech billionaires, but instead he looked at global injustice with the mind of a systems analyst, then founded WikiLeaks and the transparency movement. They put corporations and government, including the Pentagon, the FBI, the CIA, and all the other spook agencies, on notice that they could no longer count on operating in secret. State and corporate scandals had been exposed before, but there had never been anything like WikiLeaks. It guaranteed sources anonymity if they used its Dropbox secure technology, and it has never busted a source. By the time of its 10-year anniversary in 2016, it had published over 10 million documents and never had to retract a single one. Yeah. Its decentralized technical infrastructure saves it from the security state's cyber and tangible munitions, and that strikes terror in the twisted psyches of Mike Pompeo and his inner circle of spies, murderers, and thieves without borders. So if a global movement can free Julian Assange with the full force of the security state coming at him, it'll be a game changer. Okay? We can make history. We can respond to what history demands of us now. I know of 4 radical social movements with the transformational potential equal to the transparency movement. Public banking, sustainable agriculture, renewable energy co-ops, and the broader co-op movement exemplified by Cooperation Jackson and the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Collective. What? Okay. As a journalist, I cite WikiLeaks a lot. And if Julian Assange goes to prison for possessing and publishing classified materials, I could too, and so could any of you. Prosecuting Assange would establish a precedent for prosecuting any journalist or media outlet or citizen who publishes, republishes, or even quotes classified material. That could mean prosecuting any one of us just for tweeting classified docs. Now, I've got a list of particular WikiLeaks that I could go to prison for quoting and linking to, even though they're not the ones that shocked the world, like the collateral murder video of U.S. soldiers shooting Iraqi civilians from an Apache helicopter as though they were playing video games. One that I pay particular attention to is, quote, ethnicity in Rwanda. Who's governing the country? This is a cable, a diplomatic cable generated in Rwanda on July 5, 2008. It doesn't identify the sender, only the location. It was sent from Kigali, Rwanda, the capital of Rwanda. It could have been written and sent by one of many U.S. officials, the ambassador, a member of his staff, or any one of the CIA, DIA, and other spooks in the region. The recipient is the U.S. State Department, but no one in particular. Whoever wrote this described a Rwandan apartheid state, a country exclusively ruled by an ethnic Tutsi elite, headed by Rwandan President Paul Kagame, most of all an English-speaking Tutsi elite that grew up in Uganda and joined Kagame in invading Rwanda from Uganda on October 1st, 1990. The 90 days known as the Rwandan genocide were not an isolated bloodbath, but the end of a war during which Kagame's army massacred Hutu civilians on a scale equivalent to or greater than the Tutsi massacres depicted in the movie Hotel Rwanda. Now, I know that's the opposite of what most people believe. And I don't see anyone who looks shocked. Nobody's going to shout that I'm a genocide denier, okay? But I can't document this very dissonant position standing here in a few minutes. But if you'd like to know the truth about that, read Robin Philpott's book, Rwanda and the New Scramble for Africa, From Tragedy to Useful Imperial Fiction, or Judy Reaver's book, In Praise of Blood, Crimes of the Rwandan Patriotic Front. Okay. Ethnic reconciliation is one of the most bold-faced lies about Rwanda. For years, we've been told that President Kagame was Rwanda's savior, that he swept down out of nowhere to stop the genocide and ended the country's long history of bitter Hutu-Tutsi divide. This document turns the reconciliation myth on its head, and the U.S. State Department, including its higher-ups, know that. They promoted the lie and lauded the criminal president for the last 25 years. U.S. elites put him in power. He's their man in Africa. He helped secure access to the trillions of dollars worth of strategic and critical minerals in the Democratic Republic of the Congo at staggering human cost. No one has done more to lionize Kagame than the Clintons. Bill Clinton has his own lie to protect, that he failed to intervene in Rwanda in 1994, and he says it was the worst mistake of his presidency. In fact, he assigned Madeleine Albright to make sure that the UN didn't intervene. And Kagame threatened to fire on U.S. troops if they did. Now, 38% of Rwandan children, mostly Hutus, are stunted by malnutrition, while Kagame and his kids gallivant around the world feted as celebrities. He himself was just here, where the Warriors laid out the red carpet for him and his entourage at the last Rockets-Warriors game. And you're likely to see him in the stands with Bill Clinton during the NBA Finals. The brutal ethnic apartheid in Rwanda could lead to another bloodbath. And if it does, there'll be blood all over U.S. officials and elites' hands because they know that's what it is, and they've backed it up and exploited it for the last 25 years. This talk is also significant because Bill Clinton's so-called failure to intervene in Rwanda is one of the cornerstones of U.S. interventionist foreign policy. U.S. elites engineered Kagame's takeover in Rwanda. They didn't fail in what they set out to do. But we're told over and over that we have to intervene in Libya, Syria, Venezuela, maybe Myanmar next. Intervention being, of course, a euphemism for an imperial war to ransack the global south. Okay, so now let's move on to the global intelligence files. That's a leak of 5 million emails from Stratfor, an intel for hire outfit based in Texas. In the introduction to these emails, WikiLeaks writes that, quote, they reveal the inner workings of a company that fronts as an intelligence publisher, but provides confidential intelligence services to large corporations, including Dow Chemical, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and government agencies, including the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Marines, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. The emails show Stratfor's web of informers, payoff structure, payment laundering techniques, and psychological methods. Control means financial, sexual, or psychological control. Okay, well, I had a lot of these Stratfor emails, but I'm out of time. So like I said, it'll be in Consortium News, Black Agenda Report, or San Francisco Bayview, or maybe all of them. Let's see if there's anything I want to say. There was one of the Global Intelligence File docs that is particularly intriguing to me. It's called Rwandans Are Cold-Ass Mofos. And this describes the exploits of President Kagame's assassination squads in Europe and Africa. And I know a lot more of the details that are in this doc, so I wrote this one up for the Bayview and the Black Agenda Report, where the headline is, U.S. Intel, Rwandans are cold-ass mofos. They couldn't be any colder than the mofos now after Julian Assange. They can't wait to get their hands on him, to torture him and possibly even damage his outsized brain. So We've got to throw all we've got at trying to keep that from happening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. And these presentations are a little long, but they're invaluable in information about what they're trying to cover up and what they don't want the American people to know, because that is really what this is about. So our next speaker is Laura Wells, and she's a activist with the Green Party. She's run against these capitalist candidates. Welcome, Laura Wells. Very patient.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Laura Wells, and I am an activist at the Green Party. We had a presidential nominating convention in August of 2016, and Julian Assange was interviewed there live via video at our presidential nominating convention. And it was great to see him there right at the same moment that we were a packed house. Now, can you imagine the Democratic leadership, the national committees of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party having Julian Assange as an honored guest at their conventions? Wouldn't that be the world we would like to have? Instead, when the unthinkable happened and the November 2016 election went the way it did and Trump won, both Assange and the Green Party got their share of the blame in the What Happened memoir. But it's an excellent opportunity to show how everything is connected. I've recently come back from Venezuela, and one of the big partners of Venezuela was Ecuador. When the president was Rafael Correa, and he's the one that allowed that gave sanctuary to Julian Assange. And Rafael Correa has recently called the man Lenin Moreno, who is now president of Ecuador, the greatest traitor in Ecuadorian and Latin American history, because he's turned and he is cozying up to the United States, which is why they're making up. I mean, they even went so far as to imply that he wasn't cleaning up after his cat. So they're coming up, and he was rude, and he was, whatever. But they turned against Julian Assange as they were cozying up to the United States. And as I said, I just came back from Venezuela. Also, the man here in the yellow vest, Ahmet, was one of the delegation members. We had 3 of us from the Bay Area and 12 of us all together. It was an end sanctions delegation sponsored by the Alliance for Global Justice. And we need more Julian Assanges. Ordinary people are getting their news about Venezuela, and every source is off, virtually every mainstream source, whether it's Fox or CNN, MSNBC, BBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, right down the line. And then they have their friend Ahmet or Laura or Steve who's saying something else. We need to have more whistleblowers because the investigative journalism is a thing of the past. It would not take much investigation to know that what's coming out about Venezuela is upside down, and what's coming out about so many other places, Rwanda, and not to mention all the states from Maine to Arizona to California to Hawaii to Alaska. The information we're getting is wrong. I was just reading something of Daniel Ellsberg, who is totally behind Julian Assange as a modern day whistleblower. And so free Julian Assange so we can free our minds and get free information and know what we should be doing in this world. So free Julian Assange.
So one of the important things that our network is interested in doing is to bring the issue of Julian Assange to the American working class, to the trade union movement, because the attack on the Julian Assange is to prevent information going to American working people about the crimes of this government. And we were successful in getting a resolution passed by the San Francisco Labor Council, and the person that helped make that happen is Roger Scott, who's a past president of AFT 2121 and a delegate of the San Francisco Labor Council. So welcome, Roger Scott.
I'll be brief formed than some of my comrades who came before me, but I would I would like to share pertinent parts of the resolution Steve just described to you. The title is Resolution in support of the whistleblower and journalist Julian Assange. Whereas Julian Assange has helped expose the role of the U.S. and other governments of war crimes and violations of international law, and whereas there is a systematic effort by the U.S. government to harass, repress, and jail reporters and whistleblowers who expose corruption and criminal activities by government officials, and whereas U.S. officials and politicians have actually called for the murder and torture of Julian Assange to silence him. Therefore, be it resolved that the San Francisco Labor Council defends the right of journalists and whistleblowers and opposes prosecution which could affect all whistleblowers in the U.S., and be it finally resolved that the San Francisco Labor Council urges our representatives to oppose the criminal prosecution of Julian Assange for whistleblowing activities, and will forward this for concurrence to affiliated bodies. That was adopted by the Executive Committee of the Labor Council, and it was accepted by the delegate body on February 11th of this year. There are many people that should be locked up. Julian Assange is not one of them. If I had the power to lock people up, I would start with Elliot Abrams, John Bolton, and many others, and also Kissinger and Cheney. In my view, and the view of, I'm sure, all the people here, Assange is an intelligent, courageous, and heroic journalist who deserves the support of people throughout the world who know that journalists who tell the truth, at many times at great risk to themselves, are heroes, not criminals and terrorists like some of the people governing us. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have with us somebody who came all the way from Los Angeles and has contributed to the fight against the imprisonment of Julian Assange. Graham Elwood is a comedian and filmmaker. Welcome, Graham Elwood.
Right on. Thanks, brother. You got it. I'll hold both mics. I perform for a living. I can do this right like this. First, I want to thank everybody who put this together. Give them a round of applause, everybody who put this organization together. I want to thank the members of the intelligence community who are watching on the live stream right now. How you doing? You too can be a hero like Chelsea Manning if you do the right thing. You know who I'm talking to. I just want to say that, I've been a stand-up comic since I was 18. I've been an artist and a performer, and I did 7 comedy tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait. And I've seen the war up close. I don't know what it's really like to be in the infantry, but I've seen it up close, and I know that it's horrible. So when Chelsea Manning did that, what she was doing was letting the world know that America is committing war crimes. And if you're going to start locking up Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, then you know what? They could come for my friend Jimmy Dore. They could come for me. They could come for anybody here. They could lock anybody up here. Any journalist here, they could come lock you up right now and just say, oh, terrorism, war crime, whatever nonsense they want to slap on you, they'll do it. And they'll do it without any hesitation. And you see how powerful their propaganda machine is. There are 3 news outlets, right? There's AP, AFP, and Reuters. And they get their marching orders from the CIA and the Pentagon, and then they spread their information out to all all these other news sources. So you see how effective it is? You saw it when we walked down the streets. A lot of people down with what we're doing. Some people yelled out, oh, he's a rapist or he's a terrorist. They are literally repeating CIA talking points. If you think that's not effective, we just saw it walking down Market Street. That's how effective they are. They are so effective at just playing it at every turn. And people say, well, I saw it on Facebook, I saw it on Fox and MSNBC, so man, it must be the truth. No, it is not the truth. MSNBC and Fox News, Rachel Maddow, Sean Hannity, they're both professional wrestling characters, folks. That's what they are doing. It is unbelievable to watch it in effect. It is unbelievable. And when they came, first they came for the journalists, and then, after that, I don't know what happened after that because everybody else was locked up, so I got no clue what they did after that. So this is why this is so important. You see how effective it is. So when you come across your friends and family that just kind of repeat a talking point, don't get mad at them. Ask them questions. Here's what I asked them. Oh, really? Do you think Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch would be supporting Julian Assange if there was even an ounce of truth to the sexual assault claims? Do you think that they would? Do you think Amnesty International would get behind? No, they would absolutely not. Why are they lying to you? Why are they telling you this? I'll tell you why. Because it's big money, baby. War is big money. That's what they want. They are controlling every single aspect. You think the getting rid of net neutrality, you think that's just a random coincidence? You think that's a crazy thing that's happening? Because you know who's watching right now? The goddamn internet. And they don't want the internet watching because CNN's not here. We should have this rally in front of Google or Facebook or anywhere these other tech billionaires are who are paid to shut us down. But hey, they've got skateboard shoes and hoodies, so they must be cool. No. Yeah. Fire it up, friend. That's what I'm saying. They are getting every single aspect of society under their control. That is exactly what they're doing. And they want us divided. The corporate media wants us divided, distracted, and afraid. I was watching CNN before I came here. Oh, it was all about Trump, Russia, Mueller, Trump, or whatever. Oh, man, they should be talking about that there's a meteor coming to the planet, and it's called climate change. But they're not going to talk about that. We can't say anything bad against the military because they are the #1 contributor of climate change is the United States empire. So we can't have this. We can't have, they want you. They want you divided, baby. They want you arguing about Game of Thrones or what some referee did at the NBA game or who took Tom Brady's jersey. They want you not paying attention and just repeating some meme they saw on Twitter or Facebook that says, oh, Julian this and Chelsea that. Where is the outrage from the actual journalists? Rachel Maddow is an openly gay journalist and there is a transgender vet that is in jail for telling the truth. Where the hell is Rachel Maddow? Oh, that's right. She's talking Russia in segments that are literally sponsored by Boeing. Wow, what a wacky coincidence that an arms manufacturer would be actually sponsoring a segment on the corporate media so that, wow, we can have Red Scare 2.0. The height of global defense spending was in the early 80s. The height of it was in the early 80s. Gee, suddenly we need more Russia, because we'll be buying more rockets and bombs, and our allies will have to arm up, and that's why we're stacking troops up, NATO troops on the Russian border, and that's why we're trying to go to Venezuela. Weird that they have the #1 oil reserves in the world, and suddenly they need some of our hot, fresh freedom jammed down their goddamn throats. You better hope you didn't have oil in your backyard, folks, because if you do, you are suddenly a terrorist. That's what happens. If you won't give that oil up to the machine, they're going to come get you. They're going to come depose you and throw you out. Saying Julian Assange isn't a journalist we might as well then go get a time machine and go arrest Ben Bradley for publishing the Pentagon Papers in the goddamn Washington Post. That's what we should be doing. You know the Washington Post that's now owned by Jeff Bezos, who was paid $600 million by the CIA? Yeah, that Washington Post. They're a little different 40 years later. So that is the point. Get involved. This is not about today. This is about they want to control all of us. They want us afraid. It was talked about, I believe his name's Gary Webb, right? Right? What happened to Gary Webb? He committed suicide by shooting himself in the head twice. Yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah, I'm going to commit suicide by hanging myself twice, too. I'm sure that's going to happen right after this. It is a threat. They are telling you, shut up. Don't you ever think about speaking up against them, because you're going to shoot yourself in the head twice if you do that. We're going to lock you up if you do that. That's what they're saying. This isn't just one rally today. This is a movement. This is people watching on the internet. These are videos that can be shared and liked and pushed out all over the place to get involved. Do not, because they want you to just go back. You can have free speech if you go to work on time and pay your taxes and don't call out the ruling class. There is not two parties in this country. There are two classes, the ruling class and then all of us. Well, guess what? There are more of us than there are of them. Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate this. My name's Graham Elwood. You have a great afternoon. Tip your wait staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you. You want to speak?
Okay, everyone's already said it. Okay.
Lori.
Okay. If your country were committing war crimes, would you want to know? Yes. That's a question posed by Consortium News. Would you want to know if it were actually your own leaders who were rigging our elections? Yeah. Funding the very terrorists who they're supposedly waging this endless world war against? Yes. Would you want to know if your government were actually avariciously working against you and the prospect of a peaceful, healthy world? Yes, right? We are being wickedly distracted and manipulated. We have been so tricked into focusing into how have we been so tricked into focusing on farcical speculation, demonization, and criminalization of those who expose crime instead of focusing on and prosecuting the actual extraordinary crimes themselves. The manipulative propaganda, most recently Russiagate, has distracted us from the vital need to purge the world of the real sociopaths in power. It is undermining the imperative purpose of WikiLeaks, which is to hold power accountable through transparency. A legitimate press and a legitimate government for the people would be focusing on the troves of documented war crimes, atrocities, corporate political corruption, and treason that WikiLeaks publishing exposed. We need to stay focused on Julian Assange's historical legacy of revelations. We need to honor the sacrifice Assange has made for transparency of power. We cannot allow his truths to be sidelined, discounted, avoided, returned to secrecy. Secrecy and silence are the tools of oppression. We need to seriously consider what the persecution and imprisonment of Assange and Manning reveals about our reality. But it's up to us. The press has, for the most part, been folded into this criminally imperial government. Helen Buinski writes, when you tell a person that the sky is orange, it's imperative that they don't actually, that it's imperative to block out the windows so that they don't accidentally catch a glimpse of blue. But better yet is to build a house with no windows at all. And this, with the complicity of censored establishment media, is the dystopian plan. And Caitlin Johnstone writes, never lose sight of this. The intimidation of whistleblowers and leak producers threatens to stop truth from informing behaviors of our entire species, leaving only the whims of the most powerful to decide our fate. The most powerful people are those most dedicated to pursuing power, those sociopathic enough to step on anyone's head and do whatever it takes to secure as much control as possible over as many humans as possible. That's who we're handing the steering wheel of our world to if we allow truth to be intimidated into silence. The case of Julian Assange is pivotal in the course of the history of the free world. His sacrifice for the future of the free and informed humanity must not be in vain. But it's up to us. Can we fill in where the establishment press has failed us? Can we carry the torch that Julian has lit? Can we defend him and the truths that WikiLeaks reveals? We need to actively challenge government secrecy. We need to create a new media, new platforms, new networks, Facebook is no longer an alternative. We need to give it everything we have to defend and protect and project transparency, to defend and protect truth tellers, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, all whistleblowers and publishers. It's up to us to yell and scream and write and publish. Let's break through in unexpected ways to demand transparency and true justice. Demand everyone's freedom to access and speak truth. Let's demand freedom of the internet. Demand freedom of Julian Assange. No U.S. extradition. Freedom for Chelsea Manning. Demand freedom of the press. Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. So, hello. Hi. The United States and their allies are trying to criminalize and undermine the basic methods of journalism. Chelsea Manning is an example of the source, and Julian Assange is an example of a publisher. The U.S. government is attacking the core of publishing. A dark ages future faces us with the squashing of journalism. The monstrosity of the U.S. prison system is exposed in what the system intends to do to Julian Assange. Norman Finkelstein says that Assange may face 35 years at the ADMA prison in the Colorado Mountains. That means 23 hours a day in a concrete cell, which has one window that is 4 inches wide, and once a week a trip to a shower that is timed to spray for just 1 minute. This is a glimpse of what the United States truly stands for: a horror, a police state, and a country where the most prisoners anywhere in world history. We can't let this happen. Without a free press, just think what the enforcers will do to the people. Through extraordinary injustice, Julian Assange faces a mockery of justice in kangaroo court. The criminals who run the United States are the enablers of a world of kidnapping, interrogation, torture under a veneer labeled justice. Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning are suffering at a spear point of attacks at silencing journalism and truth-telling, maybe forever. Global research informed readers of the former collaborators with WikiLeaks, like The Guardian and the New York Times, that now smeared Julian Assange with the big lie that WikiLeaks is a hostile non-state actor. Truth-telling is labeled as interfering with democracy. The cronies of the criminal elite in the corporate media have been declared by Chris Hedges to be the Vichy press. Think about it. The establishment proclaims news that isn't favorable to empire as fake news. There's a problem right now. Journalists think that they are doing their jobs when they check with the government what you can actually report about the government. This goes against what WikiLeaks established. Some journalists are celebrated for publishing redacted information sufficiently similar to WikiLeaks, established by, actually it's much more worse than a pre-WikiLeaks era. Caitlin Johnstone says, never has a single innovation, WikiLeaks, shaking the existing power structures in such a short amount of time. In an inverted totalitarian system where the ability to suck resources from the people is hidden under a veil of propaganda, the ability to rip through the veil of spin and government opacity is a powerful tool indeed. In just over a little over a decade, Julian Assange managed to make himself the most wanted man alive by the most powerful people on earth. That's how effective WikiLeaks has been in bringing truth to power. And that was Caitlin Johnston who said that. Julian Assange is an exemplar of integrity of how journalism should be done. He's revolutionized journalism by going straight to the source and delivering it straight to the people with few redactions. He's invented revolutionary methods of whistleblowing in the 21st century. He's developed means of protecting a source, helping a source cover their trail. Chelsea Manning has told the courts what she knows, and she's in prison right now for protecting her publisher from a grand jury fishing for information to attack Assange. John Pilger says that Julian Assange is hero number one. We must fight against the new dark ages of censorship. We must fight for Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange. We must fight for a free press.
Thank you. And if people can send us their statements, that would be good, because we want to put all the statements together. So if you've written your statement, send it to us. So one of the central issues of the WikiLeaks is the exposure of U.S. war crimes. And, you know, the United
I'm
States
actually
has always
freezing,
worked
you
with
know
the
what?
Yeah,
And I
I
just sort of
know.
need a
Me
paper.
too. I've been thinking of. Yeah. Can you hold this? You want to hold this?
We
Okay.
invaded Puerto Rico, we invaded the Philippines, and we invaded Cuba. And one of those countries is still occupied by the United States, Puerto Rico, which the United States still exploits as a colony. And joining us is Ricardo Ortiz, an activist and revolutionary from Puerto Rico. Welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you. Actually, yes, we do have a long history of being oppressed and repressed by American intelligence agencies and the armed forces of the United States. All of you know about our fight to get the United States Navy out of the island municipality of Vieques, which we were successful. But one of the minor partners, bombing Vieques was the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy also conducted exercises there because the British government is an accomplice of the United States war crimes and also competes around the world in terms of economic influence. We should remember that William Assange exposing all these secrets and dirty tricks by the United States. Also, the British government, which participates in invasion, did participate in the invasion of Iraq, has a troop contingents in Afghanistan and so on, has a long history of intervention around the world. Actually, if you look at the United States Army Marine Corps counterinsurgency manual, you will see that the American military looks at the sample of the British intervention in Malaya in 1954, an anti-communist intervention that the British did, killing thousands of people in Malaya. That's what the British government does around the world. It's a capitalist government, has enterprises such as British Petroleum, British Associate Products, which competes with Monsanto. The British government is not a so-called sweet and rose government. It's an imperialist government that supports all the efforts that the United States and its war criminals partners do around the world. I am also a veteran of the United States Army, and I was stationed in Europe. And if you read military history, actually, the criminal Green Berets were formed and trained by a British Army unit called the SAS, which is the Special Air Service. It's the equivalent of the American Green Berets that actually helped the Americans to create the special forces for the United States Army in the 50s. So the British they do have a long history of intervening in the third world, of their corporations intervening, oppressing, and causing malnutrition and all illness and hardships of capitalism around the world and in the third world. So that's why they are after Julian Assange, because he's an example exposing all these crimes that all these imperialist powers commit around the world. And they don't want that to happen to them either. So all capitalist governments, no matter how they call it themselves, labor parties, conservatives, supposedly socialists, such as the Socialist Party of France, that during their incumbency, they had invaded countries in Africa. In the French Polynesia in the 80s, the Socialist Party of France sent troops to crush a sovereignty movement that was developing there. So, don't even think that the European imperialists are less criminals than the Americans. They are competing each other and collaborating with each other in order to establish their capitalist multinational dominance against the working class of the people of the world. So I want to say, free Assange, and the United States get out of Puerto Rico, cancel that criminal debt that the U.S. created to have everything in the country privatized, end colonialism, U.S. out of the Caribbean, out of Venezuela, out of Iraq, out of everywhere. Long live socialism.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Dave Rana, last speaker. Dave. And then we're going to have a musician, Orion, who's here, wrap it up, and we're going to all line up together with some music.
All right, thank you.
Dave.
Thanks for holding this. I'm not much for public speaking, but the situation is urgent, and so I think I have to get over my general anxieties about these things. I think we need to put what's going on with Assange and WikiLeaks in the context of a number of legislative and judicial moves that have occurred over the last decade. I would put it in the context going back to NCAA. Those people who have been following know that we've lost habeas corpus. All right, that is the biggest change in our legal structure since the Magna Carta. We can be picked up now on the street and put in a military brig without any third-party oversight, without having to be taken in front of a judge. They can disappear us, all right? And when courts were asked to review this law, they refused to review the law. Okay, so we have no judicial oversight of that law. It appears the law has already been used by what the government was saying in that case of requested review. At the same time, we have drone assassination established in the kill matrix and extending even to assassinating U.S. citizens. Even further, one journalist who has been nearly killed 5 times and is essentially certain that he's being targeted by that kill list, who is a U.S. citizen, has asked for judicial review, and again, the courts have refused to review it. On top of that, Obama has refused to say that the kill list couldn't be applied within the United States to U.S. citizens. All right? Now, in the case of Assange and WikiLeaks, this is a third move, and I've forgotten, altogether about the Patriot Act and, global spying, but with Assange and WikiLeaks, they're trying to build an Official Secrets Act. Okay, in Britain, if the UK government deems something to be an official secret, they can issue what's called a D notice, and then they stop all media from publishing it. They're trying to do something similar here. We don't have a law like that, so they're kind of pasting it together. They started by going after the whistleblowers using this old law, the Espionage Act, passed in 1917, to go after people who were against going into the First World War. All right? They tried to go then after journalists. They tried to go after James Risen, who had exposed some doings of the CIA that had effectively given nuclear weapons plans to Iran. All right? So they backed down at the last minute because he was willing to protect his sources. But they found in Assange the perfect case to start to build case law that the publication of government secrets is illegal. And because of the PR around Assange, he's become such a heated figure, they figure this is a good place to start, and then they can expand this case law and start going after people like Risen at the New York Times or anywhere else. So this situation is urgent. I really think it's one of the last steps in closing up our capacity to have any say in what our government is doing or even understanding of what it's doing. So please join us, try to free Assange, stop this rendition to the United States.
Thank you, Dave. Free Assange. Free Julian Assange. Okay, so we're all going to come together, and Orion is going to sing here. So let's line up all over here, so we can he can do a song here. So let's all. Okay. Let's all come in. That's what we're.
Is this yours?
If we're going to go together, keep it warm. That's what I have to say. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange!
Free Chelsea Manning.
Free Chelsea Manning!
Free all whistleblowers.
Free all whistleblowers!
To hell with U.S. imperialism.
To hell with U.S. imperialism!
To hell with U.S. capitalism.
To hell with U.S. capitalism!
To hell with the Democrat-Republican plurocracy.
To hell with them!
Revolution for the working class.
Yes!
We don't have free speech. I may have free speech until I'm affected. They killed 46 Black Panthers. I'm from the 60s. They wanted me to go to Vietnam. Like my brother, I think he's Iraq veteran, I'm not sure. I said, fuck you. I joined the Navy for 30 years. I thought I was gonna see the world. And I found out very quickly that I was in a fascist state at Chicago Great Lakes Trading Station. And I said, fuck you. And my generation said, fuck you. How many people went to Canada? How many people went to Canada to get away from the draft? And now they want women, Me Too movement, to sign up for what? Do you know? Sign up for selective service. And this idiot that's running, one of the Democratic idiots said that, okay, that was so wonderful. She talked to Israel fascist woman that said it was so wonderful to give a year to her fucking fascist state that's killing Palestinians. So this is not a free country. It's a myth. Black people are shot down every day. Black and brown lives don't matter this second. Black and brown lives should matter. They don't matter this second. It's a myth about all lives matter. Bullshit. Our line should be down with the capitalist imperialist press. It's not mainstream media. It's capitalist imperialist press. And they're killing thousands and 10,000s of people all over the world with their lives. Check out Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore is a wonderful supporter of Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange. He's on YouTube. Okay? He put an address of Chelsea Manning. She's in prison right this second. Right this second, she's in in the Gulag in Pennsylvania. And over 50 people have said they will write her letters. I have her address, but go to Jimmy Dore and Chelsea Manning show, and he'll have that right on his left side. And he'll say, please write letters. That's the kind of journalism we need. Now I'm going to sing a song. So everybody must get drowned. And some people, a few people, just a few fanatics have said, oh, that's too happy a song for drones. But at the end, I ask you to shoot down the drone at the end. Jason's going to help.
I got a lot more to say. I would not feel so alone. Everybody must get thrown. All right, bring that mic up a little closer, Jason. I'll stand tall. Everybody join me. I would not feel so alone. Everybody must get thrown. Let's do a little more tempo. I would not feel so alone. Everybody must get thrown. They drone you when you walk on the picket line. They drone you when you're drinking wine. They drone you when you look them in the eye. They drone you when you're occupied. I would not be so alone. Everybody must get thrown. One more time. I would not be so alone. Everybody must get thrown. My friend said, I said, I really can't play guitar. He's okay, you can do it. I don't push my fingers like Woody Guthrie said. There's a song about playing guitar. It hurts your fingers to push those fingers. Anyway. They don't know where you're supposed to be in school. $3 trillion debt, right? They don't know when you're playing a game of pool. They don't know when you're picking up your bad brother. They don't know when you're killing your favorite snails. I would not be so low. Everybody must get thrown. Hey, they don't know when you're... This gets sexy. Now bring that up, please. That's good. I like to eat the mic. They don't know when you're drinking stout. They drown you when you're making out. They drown you when you're in the woods. That's an Albany Bowl. Check it out, Albany Bowl. Google it. It's art and homeless fight we fought for years for it. It's Albany Bowl, B-U-L-B. Okay, up. They drown you when you're in the woods. Hey, they drown you when you think you're looking good. I know you think you're looking good. They drown you when you're something else. Oh, when you're in the woods. But the last verse is really cool. Louis Armstrong, Pop. His nickname was Pop. They drown you when you're listening to Pop. They drown you when you're putting in your crops marijuana. Drown you when you're building your favorite place. They drown you when you're fighting their fucking police. I said that I would not be so low.
Thank you. Solidarity, brothers and sisters. I know it's been a long day, but it's important and it's worth it. So thank you for joining us today, and we will continue the struggle. Now, May the 30th is going to be the next hearing. I understand. So we want to work on organizing an action on May the 30th to follow it up. So if you have other events and activities, let us know. We have to keep putting the word out. This is not a one-shot deal. He and Chelsea Manning face a life and death struggle. So let's continue this fight. Oh, picture. Okay, picture of everyone here. Okay. Take a picture. A cross picture. Okay.
Give me your...
The fact that we could last this long, this is the hardcore. Yeah. Okay.
Me too? Let me get down low here. I'll get down there right
Hands
here.
off Julian! Hands off Julian! Hands off Channing!
Hands off Channing!
Hands off Julian!
Hands off Julian!
Hands off Channing!
Hands off Channing!
Jail the war criminals.
Jail the war criminals.
Jail the war criminals.
Jail the war criminals.
No redactions next time.
No redactions next time.
No extradition.
No extradition.
No rendition.
Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Chelsea Manning.
Free Chelsea Manning. Now.
Chelsea Manning.
Now.
Solidarity.
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 We're with you, Julian. Free Julian now.
Free Julian now.
Free Julian now.
Free Julian now.
Free Jenny now.
Free Julian now.
Justice for all. Free all whistleblowers. Free all journalists. Free all whistleblowers. Free all journalists.
Free all whistleblowers. Free all journalists.
Free all whistleblowers. Free all journalists. Thank you, brother.
So that's it from San Francisco and Free Press, World Free Press Day 2019. And we're signing off, and we will be back. We'll be back. Free Julian Assange, free Chelsea Manning. We won't let them rendition you.